Hello and welcome to Emerald City Comic Con Paint and Potion Tavern Edition. I'm Beverly the artist, and this is our first design, Dimensional Rift Starry Night. If you're watching this video later from another location, I'm coming to you from Bremerton, Washington, from the Anne Grace Hub, my home base. I'm going to start with brush care. The smallest brush here is rather delicate. The other brushes, after you've used them, go ahead and wipe off the excess paint on your napkin, and in order to keep your water fairly clean, wipe off the excess paint and then just leave them upside down in the water and just store them there until you're ready to use them again, where you'll dry them off and use them. But the littlest ones, if you leave them there, will get bent over time. So the little ones, you will wipe off the paint, swish them about, wipe them off again, swish them about, and then wipe them and store them flat. So we're going to start with the smallest one. I also want to point out that these designs are printed using an inkjet printer, and so the ink can come off once it's activated with the wet paint. So I want to show you how I get up to the line to kind of seal the line so that it doesn't smudge and smear. I've loaded my palette with the paints that I'm going to use kind of in the order that I'm going to use them, with plenty of white. We have lots of white in this composition. Some bright yellow, some deep yellow, some primary blue, some phthalo green, some primary red, and black. So starting with a mixture, we're going to work light to dark. So starting with a mixture of about 50-50 white and yellow. Let me move this over so I can make sure you see how I mix my paint. So with a mixture of white and yellow, I'm just going to start going inside my dimensional rift. And I want to get up to that line, even going over that line, but I don't want to smudge back and forth. Laying on the paint over it is totally fine. But the more you move it, the more you risk making it smudgy. I'm even going to show you what that looks like. I like to sometimes make mistakes in front of my students so that they see what to avoid. So, I mean, it's not terrible, but it can kind of get smudgy looking, get kind of grayish, which isn't the end of the world, because if you later on just go over it with some more white and yellow after it's dry, you'll be able to fix that just fine. So I'm going to continue now to just go ahead and paint inside my dimensional rift. When I designed this class, I had in mind several of my favorite sci-fi shows. I was thinking about initially the Doctor Who episode where we had, I mean, this is from many years ago, where we had something like this. I can't even tell you which episode it was. I just remember it being a thing. Of course, it probably had something to do with time. And then, of course, there was Star Trek episodes where we had these kinds of things, Star Trek being my favorite. And then, I mean, it's not too unlike something you'd see in Stranger Things, which is the direction that I went with the trees, particularly since I saw it recently, the final season, and in light of Jamie Campbell Bower being in attendance at Comic-Con this year. I got tickets for my granddaughter to see him, and she's so excited. So I'm going to try to move along fairly quickly for you guys. You can always pause your video or fast forward. And also, I want to let you know, I mean, it goes without saying, I think, but some people need to be given permission to do their own thing. Just because I do it one way doesn't mean you need to do it that way. This is your art piece. Have fun. Do it your way. Change it up. Make it what you want it to be. I just want to encourage you to make it your own. And I will show you how I do what I do. Okay, So I got that guy done first. Now I'm going to do the moon, which is the next thing that needs to be done in just this lightest color. Let me say that yellow among the pigments is the lightest, most transparent, and weakest pigment. And so it doesn't go very well over the top of other things and maintaining its brightness. And so when I'm going to use yellow and I want it to be nice and bright, I try to do yellow first. If yellow needs to go over the top of something else and still be nice and bright, then I want to lay down, excuse me, want to lay down some white first so that it has that barrier of a nice bright opaque white. And I don't mind much, as you can probably see on this one here, I don't mind much that little outline of it showing, but if that bothers you, then just paint over it with white. It'll be just fine. A couple coats of white and it'll disappear. So the next thing I'm going to work on is a little bit of light blue. Now I'm going to switch to a bigger brush. I don't need this tiny guy for the moment, so I'm going to wipe off the excess and swish him in the water. Tap him off, dry him off, and store him flat. Now the next brush I'm going to grab will be this little guy here. So I'm still keeping with some fairly light colors, but I'm going to go with a light blue. So I'm going to take a scoop of white and a small scoop of blue. So where yellow is a very light and weak transparent pigment, blue is a very powerful pigment, and it doesn't take nearly as much blue to overpower a mix. Okay, so a nice light blue, and we're going to use this light blue in a lot of places. When I mix up paint, I don't necessarily mix up a lot of it because I want lots of fun irregularities in my painting. I want it to look nice and ishy, I call it. Lots of ish colors, not too even and matchy-matchy. But when you use a limited color palette, there's not like every color of the rainbow on here. But when you use a limited color palette, then you keep a nice cohesiveness. Everything kind of still goes together. That's not to say I don't sometimes use multiple different kinds of blues, but in this case, I'm just using the one. So I'm going to do these little circles here, but I'm leaving a little hole in the middle for those brighter yellows. But I didn't want to do it first. I'll show you why later. So Vincent did what a lot of course this is based on Vincent van Gogh's Starry Night, and he did what a lot of painters did, and that was use a tinted canvas. He painted the whole canvas a solid color and then did his painting over that, and you would be able to see hints of that underpainting in his paintings. We're just doing it on white for time, but he was all about layering. Okay, so we got all those guys done. So now we're going to do these swishy swirlies. We want them in a little bit, let's try a little bit lighter for first. So we're going to mix the same kind of blue, but we want it a little bit lighter this time to start for just this one. Well, let's make it a little lighter than that. More white. And we're going to follow the direction that we want it to go. the direction of these brush strokes is going to give us the illusion of movement. That's a little darker down in that little corner, so I'm going to go ahead and give this guy his little dark corner. Swish. And then if you are a very precise person, by all means be very precise. This isn't a particularly precise composition. Now, like I said, in mine, I changed this guy dramatically. It's up to you. This is a good time to consider if you want to do some changes in the shape of this guy. I'm just going to follow the pattern that I have here right now. If you wanted to make changes to him, I wouldn't do it. I wouldn't start it in black because black is hard to cover. But if you wanted to take your smaller brush and change him in like light green or light blue, just so you mark out where you want it to be and then paint up to it, then you can mark out where you want him to be and then come back and paint him at the end. Now this is a stage where I'm trying to get every little white spot of the canvas filled up so that when I go back and layer over my textural brushstrokes, just for design, I don't have to worry about trying to cover up all the little white spots. The little nooks and crannies of the canvas is called the tooth of the canvas. I think that's cool. That's something I do, working it in back and forth. See how I wiggle it back and forth? That's one way to work that paint in to that tooth of the canvas. Okay, going back to a lighter one here. Always, if you feel yourself getting stressed, take deep breaths, sit up straight. Remember to have fun. It takes a lot of guts to paint in front of other people. You should give yourself credit just for being here. It takes a lot of guts to teach people painting. I give myself a lot of credit for being here. Now, I gave you guys this piece of paper so that you can go all the way to the edge. You'll notice since I have some blue on the brush already that I usually just have to add more white to it and it blends with the blue that's already on the brush. I do that a lot. I rarely clean my brushes in between. I just go with what's on there, so I keep mixing and getting those nice ishy colors. Okay, we're getting there. Now the background of the sky is going to be a slightly darker version, kind of more like this, but it's going to grow a little bit darker. So we're going to just keep adding a little more blue to that. So when it gets too heavy on the back of the brush, then I kind of squish it off and load it back up onto the tip. Remembering these are mountains, so I don't want to accidentally turn these into clouds or sky. And the lines only go so far, so we're going to have to go ahead and extend them. I want to keep my paint fairly flat. If there's any areas where it's built up and gotten goopy, I want to kind of flatten it out because I want it to dry before I go to the next stage. If you want to switch to your big flat brush for this stage, feel free to go ahead and grab your larger brush. You can even add a little bit of water if you want to get the paint to sink into those little spots. See how I scrub it in? I don't want to goop it up with too much paint in this phase because, like I said, I want it to dry. The following steps use fairly thick paint. I'm going to move over here. I'm going to add a little white to this area here because I want to make sure that the tip of this tree here has good contrast with it in the background. If the background is too dark, it won't have good contrast. That's important in your composition, that you make sure that there's good contrast in all your elements. Now I come in carefully, but not too close to my dimensional rift, because I'm going to come back with black, really dark blue, to make that an intense contrast. That contrast is going to emphasize the brightness of the rift. people will commonly call me over and ask if they're doing it right. And my answer is, if you're doing it, you're doing it right. I mean, this is not the kind of art class where you're being graded. This is the kind of um, experience where if you are practicing art, you are doing it right. You're doing this for your enjoyment, for your experience. You're not being graded. There is a time and a place for someone to say, okay, if you want to achieve a certain look, a certain style, you want to uh, say, yes, this is right, no, this is wrong, but not in my experiences. Nope, that's not what I'm here for. I'm here to empower you, encourage you, do your own thing, art for art's sake, for enjoyment. Art is for everyone. I have a very dear friend who is a brilliant artist, um, not as a painter in a different art medium, but she does not do drawings. So she pays me uh, substantially to do her drawings for her because she had an art teacher tear up her drawing as a child. And I just think that is the saddest thing. Okay, so this brush is getting a little too um, hard to control in these little areas, so I'm going to wipe off the excess and store it in the paint and go back to my little guy. Gonna wet this paint just a little bit, make it easier to control, not too runny. And you got to be careful too, because paint will gather back here on this little spot, and so you want to dry it off in the napkin, or I just roll it off on my fingers, because if that little drip comes down, then it'll kind of run off onto your painting and kind of make a mess of what you're doing. Acrylic paint usually takes a couple coats to get full coverage. It's just like if you were painting the walls of your house. Now, watercolor paint, you can get a nice coverage with one coat if you're doing a wash, and layering too much can make it look overworked. But acrylic paint, you are probably going to expect at least 2 coats of paint in every area of your painting. So don't worry if it looks brushy. And as we all say, all as artists, embrace the ugly phase. Don't worry if it's not looking the way you wish. Just keep going. Also, between you and me, painting with the light in my face and my hands outreach while my face is way back here is not the easiest, but I will do my best. I just can't promise that this is going to be my best version of this, but I will show you what I do, show you what I know. No apologies. Of the 4 paintings that we're going to be doing this weekend, I would say this one is the most complex. So I wanted to start with this one. Okay. Now let's get back to these little around the stars areas. Okay, good. That'll do. Now while that's drying, let's do our foreground. Oh, you know what? Let's not forget the moon. So I'm going to wipe off the excess, clean that a little bit. I don't want to clean off all the blue. Dry most of it. Add back the white and the yellow. So this is a very, very, very slightly shadowy. I mean, it's very almost green, just a very super, super light green. That's going to go in this area of the moon. Maybe even a little too green. There we go. Let me bring back the corner. There we go. Oops. Okay, good. I love it when that happens because now I can show you what happens if that happens to you. So I'm going to clean off my brush. A nice clean brush if you want to clean up an owie. And just use a clean, damp brush to lift the paint up, even kind of scrub it back and forth. And then lift it off with your napkin. If you need a brush that's more substantial than the little one, grab this guy. Just damp, not soaking. Kind of erasing it back and forth. And then just dab it off. And paint over it. Boy, life is full of mistakes and happy accidents. Just keep going. The show must go on. Now, pretty much the only reason that I have this deep yellow here, yeah, that guy can be left in there, that guy can be left in there. The only reason I have this deep yellow is to add a little emphasis to the moon. It almost looks orange, but this slightly orangey yellow is a beautiful contrast against the blue. And then once we add all the little extra brush strokes in there, it's going to pop and look great. Put that in there too. So I wanted to leave that little spot. And I wanted the orange to overlap the blue, not the blue to overlap the orange, or deep yellow in this case. And it's not a super precise circle. It's not supposed to be. That's not what we're going for. So don't stress over trying to make it a perfect little circle. Got a little holiday going on there. There we go. Okay, pretty good. All right, moving on. Okay, gonna take the nope, I'm gonna move on to the bigger guy. This guy. Nope. Yeah, this guy. And we're gonna do the same kind of lightish blue here in these mountains. Very light blue. I don't want to cover up the church steeple. It's an important focal point in that part of the painting. I like the flat brush because I like to be able to get that kind of crisp edge. Okay, now we have some darker rolling hills. So I'm going to wipe the white off the brush. I'm not going to clean the brush, just going to wipe the white off. And I'm going to take, load my brush with the darkest blue. And I'm going to take a bit of that phthalo green and mix them together. This is one of those places it's going to take a couple coats to get that full coverage. maybe a little more bluish. There we go. Because we want to have that far away night bluish, cool light, atmospheric distortion look. The only thing really green is going to be in the trees that are closest to us. Again, don't want to lose our steeple. And we can turn the brush this way and get that flat edge up against here. We'll go back and forth to get in close. I love a flat brush. Sometimes I'll do an entire painting with just one flat brush. See how it just sculpts into all those little nooks and crannies? Okay, good coverage. Yeah, we might even like that brushy look and not go over it again. That's really nice. Okay, now the next area is more kind of a tealy blue. So I'm just, with that same color that I had on my brush, I added a little more blue and some white. Yep, there we go. And then it's up to you whether you want any lights on in your town. Since mine was more ominous, I had no lights on. It's been noted that in Van Gogh's painting, all of the lights are on in the town except for the church. Like, I don't know what that means. Presumably it was intentional. Typically, if you are a precise painter, you want to use a smaller brush. And if you are a more loose and gestural painter, you want to use a larger brush to kind of force you to not be as detailed. I am a loose gestural painter, and so I tend to use a larger brush. I also like the larger brush because it holds more paint, but then you get a smoother look. But this particular subject is going to give us both. Okay, and now down here in the foggy town area, we're going to have it be a little more to the green. So we're going to add some green and white together, but we're even going to add a tiny bit of yellow because we want this to look like a gloomy mist. That looks a little too bright. I'm going to add a teeny bit of red to kind of muck it up a little bit. That's too much red. Let's try adding this yellow, more white. Okay, we're starting to get there. More yellow, more yellow, more white. I'm getting the color I'm after. More white. Very, very, very pale, gloomy green is what I'm after. More yellow. Okay, I like that. That'll do. All right, too much paint on the back of my brush. And you want to have enough paint on the brush so that you get like those crisp lines. Unless you are wanting the faded blended edge. So on that one we ended up with a faded blended edge. On this one I'm doing the crisp edge. That's how you do it. If there's hardly any paint on it and it just blends out, that's called a dry brush technique. If you leave more paint on the brush, that is that's a wet on wet or wet on dry. And then when the brush is wet, then you get that crisp line. You can control the direction. Okay. All right, so let's see. On this one, I had these same mists kind of going all about in the town. So let me add that same, while I have that color on my brush, let me have that same color kind of mixed about in the town. I'm going to add a little more white to it. Down here, more foggy. All around these houses. So what was, trees and shrubs and things in Van Gogh's town is an eerie mist in our dimensional rift town. Like what's coming through that dimensional rift? Now for contrast, I'm going to add, we want to keep this a very ish color, not very intense saturated version of any color, but very, greenish, bluish, yellowish, very ish. But we still want to get good coverage. So a little more blue to make it just a little more ish. There we go. A little more white on it here. I'm excited to see all the different versions we're going to get of this. That's my favorite, really. I mean, as much as I love to paint, getting to see all the different ways people interpret my subject is just amazing. I love that. It's my favorite thing. Okay, let's finish that off. I could get in the weeds and spend 3 hours on this, but get a move on, Beverly. Okay. All right, now let's talk about, let's get this bit over here. That same mist is encroaching from this side. Is it a mist? Is it trees? You don't really know. It's subject to your interpretation. You can make it very clear what it is, or you can make it unclear. It's up to you. Okay, let's let that soak. Now let's make the little detailed houses. So we're going to use back to the little brush. Let's talk about mixing kind of a brown and a gray. So a gray, we don't want to just use black and white. That makes kind of a very boring gray. So let's talk about mixing the primary colors. We'll start with brown. Anytime you want to make a brown, it's a mix of the three primary colors. You can make it a warmer brown, a cooler brown, a lighter brown, darker brown, but let's just start with yellow. Remember, blue is very powerful, so it doesn't take as much. Blue and medium amount of red, and see what we get. That's a pretty nice brown. If I wanted it lighter, I could add white, but I'd probably, yeah, that's not too bad. Okay, might want to add a little more yellow if I'm going to add white to it so it doesn't end up looking chalky. Okay, so some of these roofs, if it's going to be close to the moonlight, can have some light glow on it. If it's going to be in shadow, maybe back here. So I'm sure you've heard of Impressionist. Van Gogh was a post-impressionist or after-impressionist. I don't want these roofs to be all the same color. I want them to be a little different. So I'm going to take my same brown and add a little bit of this or a little bit of that to make them different. But so anyway, a post-impressionist. But Impressionism is fascinating. You'd think that, they were just after this loose, brushy style. What really happened was you had these classically trained painters who were accustomed to making their sketches of their subject out in the field, if they were going to do landscape art, and then going back into the studio to do the painting with the paints that they had to mix, themselves in the studio. With the invention of the portable paint tube, however, they were free to paint out in the real world. And that just opened a whole new world of them experiencing light and trying to capture the light in the moment. And so really the foundation of the Impressionist movement was trying to create the illusion of light using color. And this is where you have like Monet's haystacks at various times of the day using like purple and yellow to try to create the illusion of light. And the reason that they were loose and brushy is because they had less time to try to capture that light. So now let's try to using the same concepts that we did with the brown, let's make a gray. But we're going to make it like a little bit more like a light purplish. So a little more red, a little more blue. And now when we add white to it, it's a gray, but it's a more interesting gray. It's less flat gray. It's an ish color. There's not a lot of rhyme or reason to which colors I'm choosing for the houses here. I'm kind of being semi-random, although I am choosing grays for the church. But the houses are just kind of a mix of grays and browns and greens and kind of earthy colors. Let's make I'm going to use a teeny bit of black in this to darken the back side of this. Another reason for not using black for the back side is when I do use black, I want it to still have its full impact. Remember, it's all about contrasts. Added a little red to this. Maybe these people have a red house, but it's not bright red because it's late at night in a gloomy time of day. And these people have a greenhouse, but it's not a bright green. It's a nice earthy green. I'm going to add a little brown to it. When I was young, of course, I did used to watch Bob Ross after school. And after Bob Ross, there was an acrylic painter, and he always kept a jar of muddy paint water that he used to diffuse his colors if he wanted them to look more natural and not as bright and saturated. If he wanted it to look more earthy, he would just use a little bit of dirty paint water to just kind of subdue it. I sometimes will use a little bit of my dirty paint water, but most of the time I just grab a little bit of an opposing color. But I just never forgot that guy. The paint's been out for a while. If it's starting to feel mucky and hard to control, just dip your paint in the water, tap it off so it's not too much, and go ahead and swish it around in there and get some better control. The Impressionists, like a lot of painting movements, did not give themselves the name. It was their critics that gave them the name Impressionists. Like the Fauvists, which is my favorite, one of my favorite art movements, and definitely by far my favorite name for an art movement because it means wild beasts. I think that's hilarious that these critics are like, oh, they paint like a bunch of wild beasts, like a bunch of Fauvists. You know, like Henri Matisse and his green faces. I used to work at a cool place called the Dancing Brush where you could paint your own pottery, and we'd get, you know, kids come in with their grandmas, and I'd hear the grandma say, "There's no such thing as a purple giraffe," and I'd have to rush over there and say, "Well, as soon as you make one, there is," you know. try to defend the honor of the purple giraffe. All right, what do you think? Is there hope? Is there light in the windows? I'm going to say yeah. Cleaning my brush well. Actually, I'm going to put a little white in there first to redefine that window. Got a little messy. Nice, bright glow. No matter what's coming through that dimensional rift, there's hope. Okay, very nice. Okay, I'm going to save this guy for last and go on to the texture in the rest of it. So let's do the darkness behind the spatial rift first. Let's get that contrast out of the way. So let's do blue and a tiny bit of black. I just don't want it to be solid black. And we'll get in with this brush, maybe a little wet, a little extra water because we want to have good control and really nice and crisp. This is the one place where I will be precise. And you see how I'm going from the inside out, and already I'm letting this be the beginning of those textural brush strokes. They're kind of radiating out. And I want enough, so you see how I roll my paintbrush to get it off the back so I can aim it back at the tip, because that's where I want it so I can have good control. Now, I'm not going to take the time to do it, but if your dimensional rift got a little too muddy or wasn't quite bright enough, go ahead and go over it with some more white and some more yellow. But I'm just going to move on right now for the sake of your time. kind of almost like wiggle it into place and then drag it. And I do like making sound effects. I would love it if you guys would post these to Instagram and mention me. My Instagram is Art is for Everyone, and that is all one word. Art is for every and the number one. So mention me so I can see how yours turned out. And feel free to turn your page so you can still get it from the same angle. Trying to do it from the bottom and pull it in the same way isn't going to get the same, but turn the page so you can get the same effect in all directions. I will be selling extras of these. You can find me if you're still at Comic-Con at the Anne Grace Hub room number 330. Or if you go to my website, beverlytheartist.com, it should be up and running by then. You can order them. I have many, many, many designs. I'm pretty happy with that. That looks pretty like, it could be scary. You could say it looks scary. Yeah, I could say it looks scary. Anyway, I have many designs to choose from, pre-printed on the canvas for you, and I would love to see the work that you do. And if you just want to share your own designs with me, that would be great. While I have this on my brush, I'm going to go ahead and outline my houses a little bit, because this is a good color to do this with. It doesn't have to be blackety black. So in this case, I really want to be precise. So I've got it damp, but not too damp. I've dried off the back of the brush here, and I've twisted it and got it focused onto just the tip. And I'm using just the tip to very carefully take a deep breath. Get that steeple. Okay. There we go. The cool thing about my home base, the Anne Grace Hub, is, hub is kind of, I don't know, it's kind of a weird word. But, I mean, it's so appropriate because we bring together different people, different organizations, different nonprofits. We partner with groups like Scarlet Road, which if you haven't heard of them, definitely check into them. Crafting groups. We are a makerspace that benefits, like our primary mission is foster youth and veterans who, perhaps after they've gotten out of the military need some direction, some community. Okay, and I'm also going to, let's just say a couple of these places have windows that are darkened. We'll just assume that they're sleeping, blissfully unaware. And then there's some like different shapes going on here. There, that makes it fun and interesting. All right, before we move on, also, while I have the same color on my brush, I like to be frugal that way. This is the color that I want to use on the hillside, and this is a good time to start really doing those kind of Van Gogh style. This is the fun part, those textural. This is how you get those. Imagine you're looking at like a cartoon and you see those action lines, you know, like the cat is running and you see those action lines that show you which direction he's going. So these are kind of like that to me. That's what I think of. You can see how in the context of what other artists had done before him that Vincent would be considered a weirdo. But I mean, we all are just fascinated and amazed at the effect. That's fun. It's fun to do too. And there's nothing that says in your painting that you have to do every section that way. This is your painting, and so you can do it the way that you want. It's kind of fun, I think, to leave some areas plain. It depends on how much time you want to take to do it. But I would definitely do it in all of the sky areas. So I'm going to move to the sky areas now. Particularly now I'm going to wash off my brush and do around the stars and the moon, because I think that those are really key. I'll clean it up pretty well, because I don't want those dark blacky blues coming through in my bright. Stars and moon. Oh, my palette's a mess. And that is to say, if your palette is a mess and you need to get a fresh palette, that's totally fine. You can, we're here for you. If you're still at the tavern, you can get a fresh palette. If you need more paint, that's fine. So I'm going to mix some yellow and white and start doing these. Always following the direction. You want to have plenty of paint on your brush when you're doing this. So I don't let it run out. They're kind of like dashes. Let it be therapeutic. I think it's a funny juxtaposition of the bright, cheery stars against that ominous dimensional rift. See how much brighter it makes them since it's got that kind of orangey underpainting, and when you go over it, that it kind of shows through a little bit. It makes them more punchy. I'll do the same with the moon. Gives it so much more of a glow. If you're doing this later in the quiet of your home, you can hear the scritch, 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 and it's very therapeutic. For these guys, I like to do the darker lines first and then the lighter lines. Or I don't know. Sometimes I do one and then the other. It doesn't matter. I'm going to do the light ones while I have this on my brush. Do one and then the other. See what you like best. Let's do some light blue. Whoops. You get the idea. So, all right, I'm going to move on to the tree. I will do it kind of in between the straightforward Starry Night, the way Vincent did, and the way that I did my more Stranger Things version of it. So you kind of have a variation to choose from. And yeah, let's see. So wiping off the excess, cleaning off my brush. 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 Got a lot of paint in there, so oh yeah. Really want to take care of those little guys. Okay, I'm going to use the bigger brush, or any of those bigger brushes will do, and lay down a bunch of green. Now, I did add one to this side. And I think it balanced the composition nicely. But you will want to make sure that you got all the texture on these areas before you do these guys in the foreground. Okay, wiping off the excess. Now we'll come in with, actually that looks a little too cheerful. Let me moody it up a little bit. So in order to make that green a little less cheerful, I'm going to add a little bit of the brown, a little bit of red mixed in with it, a little yellow to lighten it up. There we go. Kind of just scrub that in an irregular way. That's better. Maybe not quite so dark. Let me add more yellow. So I want to keep good contrast, and I want it to show up even a little white. Oops. That other yellow made it too green. Let's go back to red. There we go. So in my world, this was the trees were responding to the dimensional rift. My painting is telling that story. All right, this time I'm going to go full bold and use actual black for my contrast, because whatever's going on in the background has its own contrast, but I want the foreground to have the most impact to distinguish between the foreground and the background. Okay, deep breath. Whenever I'm going to use black, I want to make sure I'm feeling nice and confident. Okay, so we're going to add some nice kind of curly shapes to this. You know, what's surprisingly hard is to paint something that looks organic and natural. It's our inclination to follow patterns and make things look even, but trees don't usually grow in nice even patterns. Okay, so I'm going to give them some curls. Again, thinning out, especially because the paint's been sitting here for a while. It's gotten a little extra goopy. If you need some fresh paint, go ahead and we are happy to provide. Okay, there we go. If you start from the end, make sure it's nice light motion. That's cool. And that's a fun little tangle. Now I don't want my tree to overlap my dimensional rift, so I am going to have it come off this way. Just swish and swish and swish, and then roll to a fine point. Maybe they're thorns. I want to make sure that these are nice. Fat branches, so we'll give them some those same kind of textures here. It's almost a Dr. Seuss quality here. Ah, I like it. Alrighty. Maybe there's a few creeping up from here. Okay, well, thank you for joining us. I'm going to call that finished for now, and I hope to see you on Instagram.